Of our connection session today, where we're going to be talking with three farmers who have all participated in farm to food assistance and LFPA programs. And we'll get to hear from them and really center their voices during our discussion today. And then we'll close out with a little recap and hear from you all before we end for the day. Next slide, please. Perfect. So we are going to share a few updates before we hear from our farmers. And if you could just move it over to the next slide, that would be great. Perfect. So last month, we were really lucky to be joined by the folks from Groundwork Center to do a training on storytelling around LFPA and farm to food assistance work more broadly. And thanks to the collaboration between Groundwork Center, the Food Systems Leadership Network, and the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, or NSAC, we have an F2FA storytelling guide that is now available to all of you. So this is a really great resource to help you in your storytelling around farm to food assistance work in your community so that we can continue to show why this program, why programs around farm to food assistance are so important to our farming communities and our communities at large. Um, Another really exciting thing to help support that work is that the Food Systems Leadership Network and Groundwork Collective are also starting a brand new peer writing group for storytelling around this topic. So you're encouraged to join so that you can join your peers who are also doing the storytelling work to share ideas, writing resources, and just get support in general around the storytelling work that you're doing. So the kickoff session is going to be next week on Thursday, a week from today, at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And at this initial call, the plan is to co-create a plan to get a bunch of stories produced in the months ahead. We have heard from our friends at NSAC that there's no immediate need for these stories at this present moment, but there will be. And so it's a really great opportunity to be able to story bank and collect those stories so that when we need to do advocacy work, they're at the ready. If you would like the invitation for this peer-to-peer storytelling group that's emerging, you can email Susan, and her email is right up on the screen there. All right, our next update is about the state level advocacy learning space, and Parker, who's a member, is going to share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Shelby. And member is it feels like a strong word. This is a really organic virtual gathering that's taken place 3 times this year, almost monthly, but it's a group of LFPA program coordinators from various states. We literally met in the hallway at a farm to school conference in Albuquerque in December and just sharing updates like what's happening in our respective state legislatures, what success stories can we share, what strategies can we learn from one another? So it's very informal, very emerging. And this is late breaking for this group, but since you're here, you might also be interested in policy around farm to food access. So I just wanted to make a plug for this group. Like I said, there's 60 members already on the listserv. We have 24 states currently represented, but we'd love to cover the spread, cover the map. So if you're interested in joining us tomorrow at 1 Eastern Time, email Nick Wood. He's in North Carolina, but he's our fearless de facto leader for now. So there's that email. I'll drop it in the chat as well. And oh yeah, Thomas is on the call. Some members, there's great cross-pollination happening right now between Food Systems Leadership Network and this statewide, state level advocacy learning space. So yeah, I joined the planning team last month and we're just looking to grow it with your support. So check it out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Parker. Oh, and then Rajesh, would you like to share a little bit more about the Growing Stronger Communities Conference?
Hi, Shelby. Hi, Parker. Thanks so much for the opportunity. Yeah, hi to everyone. I'm Rajesh Merchandani. We've just been talking about storytelling. I actually run a social impact consultancy called Storyteller Consulting. And I'm here to tell a little story. about year two of our conference called Growing Stronger Communities. I see from the participants list and some of the image and some of the video on the screen that some of you were there. Thank you for coming. So hello to old friends, hello to soon to be friends. This conference will be in year two this year. We're coming back for year two. It's going to be in November in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's organized by Interfaith Food Shuttle, which is one of the biggest food banks in North Carolina. And they're unusual for a food bank in that they run and operate their own farm. And they are heavily invested in farmer relationships and local food systems. And that's what this conference is about. It's about increasing the amount of local food grown by communities for a bunch of reasons, in order to make people healthier, in order to create opportunities, and basically in order to grow stronger communities. Because we know resilience is comes from the ground up. And you all know that. I learned that from you guys. So I just want to kind of like give a heads up that the conference is coming back. Registration is now open. There's a tiny little QR code there on the screen, but I think I'm just going to drop the website address into chat because we can actually sign up from there as well. My partner in crime on this is Charles Parrish, who's the VP for Agriculture at Interfaith Food Shuttle. He's a part of this community. He's actually on the call. Charles, I don't know if you want to kind of come off mute, say hi to everyone, and just add your 2 cents about what folks can expect from the conference and what you got out of it last year while I put the website address into chat.
Thanks, Rajesh, and thanks, Shelby, and the team here. Appreciate you all welcoming us back and for spreading the word here. Great to meet and re-meet so many of y'all who could join us, and hopefully those of you who couldn't last year can join us this year. I think Rajesh already gave a great overview, but I think one of the biggest insights for me out of the conference last year is, there is a good deal of overlap between a lot of different networks across the US, Canada, and that were represented at this conference. And so the F2FA network being one of them, it was a great way for a lot of these virtual communities to connect in person. So a lot of those organic interactions that we don't always get to have here on these great calls. I think it's just really great value add to a lot of these relationships, as well as a great way to kind of merge and blend some of those communities. So really looking forward to growing that conference again this year and invite everybody here on the call to join. So thank you.
Yeah, and as Charles just talked about merging and blending, this is a conference that brought together 150 people from 28 states last year. And it was happening right at the time of the shutdown and just as LFPA had finished. So people had a lot going on, but they they brought themselves to Raleigh, North Carolina. And what was really amazing was that people did not spend time dwelling on the negative. We really talked about asset framing. What are the assets in our communities? How can we come together? How can we build the partnerships and relationships that we need to actually take this work forward? There were food banks there. There were farmers there, nutrition experts, educators, community leaders, community organizations as well. It was a really great cross section, both geographical and the types of work people do. We really hope that you guys will come along, bring community partners with you. The more community partner voices we get, the better it is. Everyone is enriched from that. And yeah, please sign up. And early bird registration is available now, and we're also open for people to submit session ideas as well. Thanks so much for the opportunity, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing about this opportunity. I think every chance we get to be in person together in this largely virtual world is transformative and important for our food systems work. So, really grateful to have another opportunity to do so. All right, we are going to move along. So, if we could go to the next screen. Perfect. All right. So this is really the bulk of our time together today is a really special opportunity to get to hear from a few farmers who participate in farm to food assistance work. And as all of us on this call know, these programs could not exist without our farmers. We know how tirelessly they work to produce nourishing food for their communities, on top of being business owners, doing a lot of administrative work, trying to get into new markets, a lot of the times having their own families and neighbors to take care of as well. And as we heard from everyone at the beginning of this call and your introductions, we know that we learn so much and can make our programs so much better when we center farmers in our work. Many of you over the last couple of months have expressed the desire to hear from more farmers in this community of practice. And so today we're really excited to have three incredible farmers with us to talk about their experiences participating in LFPA and other farm to food assistance programs. We do have a list of questions that we'll be working through, many of which are actually pulled directly from or inspired by the Farm to Food Assistance storytelling guide that I referenced earlier in our call today. So we're encouraging you all to use this as inspiration for thinking about the Farm to Food Assistance stories that you want to tell in your community to demonstrate their impact on the farming community and the community at large. We'll also have about 15 minutes towards the end of the call for questions and answers. So if you have any as our farmers are talking today, feel free to drop them in the chat. Parker will be compiling them, so we will try to get to as many as possible in that Q&A section after the main part of our panel today. And if we could jump over to the next slide, I just want to show a quick graphic of where our farmers are coming from today. I think it's really special that we have three women farmers that are joining us today. It is the International Year of the Woman Farmer, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization. And we are just so excited to learn from these amazing farmers and hear about their experiences. So we have Ashley Wenke from Pleasant Grove Homestead in Iowa, B. Johnson from Sunbow Produce in Oregon, and then Kristen or KK Kavir from Footprint Farm in Iowa. Welcome to our community of practice. We're so excited to have you all here today. Yeah, feel free to throw up a clapping hands emoji or a heart to welcome them. And I would love, we're actually going to stop sharing screen so we can see everybody's faces if that's okay. And we'll start with some introductions from our farmers themselves. So if you could each take turns sharing your name, farm, location, and then what is your least favorite vegetable to harvest?
Hi there, I can go first. Ashley Winky, Pleasant Grove Homestead in southern Iowa. We have produce, but we also have egg-laying hens, honeybees, meat, chickens, and we used to do hogs, but we're kind of scaling out of that. And my least favorite crop to harvest, probably green beans, because it's very labor intensive and we grow a lot of them. And people always try to haggle on the price, but they don't realize how long it takes to pick the beans. So that's probably my least favorite.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Bee. I'm in the Willamette Valley in Corvallis, Oregon. And we grow over 70 different fruits and vegetables, so highly diversified on about 6 acres. And my least favorite vegetable to harvest is leeks, because if you've been in Oregon in the winter, you know it rains and the water table's really high on our farm. So harvesting leeks when they're at their best is the worst experience because you end up just your boots get sunk in the mud and they're just dirty and it's just really time consuming, and they root super deep. So it's just a lot of like labor. You can't get in there with a tractor or anything, at least not on our farm. So that would be my least favorite.
Hi, everyone. My name's KK. I am the owner of Footprint Farm in San Diego, California. My farm is an urban farm on 1 acre in the city. And I grow mostly just mixed vegetables, a little bit of fruits. I was going to say green beans too, but I actually don't grow green beans for that reason. But I'll go with green onions. Those are also pretty tedious to like clean up. They're just a little more time consuming than I wish they were to be efficient.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to introduce yourselves. Um, I think leeks are my least favorite vegetable to clean and prepare for cooking. So it's funny that they're also challenging to harvest. And I appreciated the glimpse into each of your farming experiences and what that's like. Thank you so much. Our first question for y'all is how did you get involved with farm to food assistance work, either LFPA or another program? And whoever is ready first can just jump on in.
Yeah. Hi. So my husband and I bought our first farm in 2016 and had vegetables more than what we needed for our family by 2017. And we just kind of grew from there to it being full time for both my husband and I. In that meantime, before we had enough income to be farming full time, I was actually running a food pantry in our rural community and kind of got this interest and investment there in local food and this idea that like we need fresh stuff coming to the food pantries and we need food in the food pantries that people actually want to eat. Like we can't just give them like almost rotten discounted Walmart lettuce. Like that's not cutting it in our community. And people do want fresh stuff, but they want it to be fresh. And so we jumped on the LFPA LFS train as soon as it was released because I knew that that would be a reasonable solution to get both produce and proteins into our local food pantries. And so, yeah, even like when we had a roadside stand, it's always been self serve. And people always ask me, like, well, what if someone is stealing something? Like, well, if someone needs a dozen eggs, like, I guess they need a dozen eggs. And most of the time, I found people were not stealing. They usually just didn't have the right cash on them. So they're putting in $10 this week, and then next week they only spent five. So they're keeping track of it in their head with what they owe me. But in general, if someone was going to steal something from a roadside stand, they need to eat, I guess. So yeah, that's kind of how we got on track with it.
Thanks, Ashley. B or Kristen, do you want to share on this one?
Sure, I could share. Um, so I also worked for a food hub and helped found that food hub with a bunch of other farmers. So we're a worker and farmer owned cooperative. And so we had some established connections with two food banks in the area, and we were doing wholesale with them. So we actually found out about LFPA through those partners. Um, and then we decided to internally pack a certain number of boxes at our food hub, but then contract out the rest of the boxes directly to the farms that own our business. So that's how I got started on it.
I had a similar experience of knowing, having people in my network who had heard about LFPA and happened to forward an email through a board that I was serving on. And so it was not even through the lenses of as a farmer, but just through the lens of as a food systems member at that time. So I got lucky. Uh, I think that's it. I just got lucky. I just happened to be reading the right email at the right time.
I find it so interesting that you all seem to have been involved in food access work before your experience with LFPA. Did that shape the way that you approached participating in the program from what you grew to, who you chose to work with through LFPA?
For me, 100% it did. The organization that I was a part of is called 10 Rivers Food Web, and it's a regional organization here in Oregon. And served on the board for about 5 years, and the entire time I was also farming. And what I noticed was that there was a big disconnect between the people who were organizing around regional economic vitality and food systems connections and the people actually like raising the food. Um, and then, of course, then there's the further disconnect of the people who are often doing the majority of the labor in the fields are not necessarily the people who are receiving or purchasing the food. And so, yeah, it was for me an instantaneous connection of, okay, if I'm guaranteed these funds, then I can share the the abundance of what that's going to mean with folks who don't normally have access to a farmer's market or our online store. Um, and yeah, it was absolutely important to that for me.
I can chime in next, and I see that this Amanda asked a question about the large food banks getting bottlenecked so that the smaller farms can't necessarily participate. In Iowa, we have uh, 5 food hubs across the state, and each food hub was assigned how much LFPA money they would have. And so in my case, I worked through a couple of different hubs just because my farm, I guess as far as produce goes, we would say that we're mid-sized for compared to other farms in Iowa. But one of the food hubs that I think ran their program the most efficiently in terms for the smaller farms is by just assigning a budget to each food pantry and then letting them connect directly to the producer to get what they need. And so, for example, Montezuma Food Pantry is the closest one to me, but that food bank is all the way 2 hours north. And so it's the last stop from the food bank. So instead of like me driving all of my things up to Waterloo and then being distributed back down, I could just work directly with Montezuma Food Pantry, and they could say, hey, I need 45 dozen eggs this week. Hey, I don't have any fresh vegetables. And we would just work directly and then send the invoice up to Waterloo versus sending the product up to Waterloo. And I think that kind of helped distribute it to everyone and give me the option of working with the food banks or the food pantries that were the closest to me. And there was sometimes where we would have a lot where like we would take it to those larger food banks. But most of the time we tried to just stick with our county and move our LFPA money right within our county. If that gives some perspective.
Absolutely. All right. Yeah, I think it really goes to show how having those relationships, infrastructure, and insight were really valuable to you being able to jump right into LFPA projects and just a really interesting look at farmers who are already doing that work. So thank you for sharing. Our next question is, do you currently participate in other market channels outside of farm to food assistance? So this might be direct to consumer via farm stands, farmers markets, farm to school work, restaurants, grocery stores, anything else. And what does that look like for you all right now?
Plus and Grove Homestead, we do a variety of all of those channels. The benefit that LFPA had was that I could I could grow more and know that I would likely have a home for it versus just kind of guessing that a product would sell well. Like for example, prior to LFPA, we were sitting at about 300 egg laying hens, and I knew that I could sell that many eggs in a reasonable amount of time. Well, LFPA, we in our area, our food hub did a very great job planning with us, and so they told me, "Hey, you can send up to 110 dozen eggs per week to these 5 local food pantries. If they don't need them, save your budget, but that's kind of like the maximum that you could send." Well, that told me, okay, well, I can go to 700 laying hens and still feel comfortable selling that. And then meanwhile, use that income to scale up other efficiencies like buying an egg washer and those kinds of things. So we pushed really hard on using our profits during the LFPA year to make it so we could operate faster once we knew that money was going to be gone, which we thought was 3 more years from when it actually was. And so we still do all of those above markets, and we're actually really lucky in one of our county. The food hub actually personally fundraised to replace the LFPA money, and so we didn't have as much pain from the loss of income from the lack of LFPA because that food hub just generated the majority of the money all by itself. Yeah, I saw a wow there. Yeah, it was really amazing because at the time LFPA was cut, we had already purchased, the 300 laying hens. We already planted the tomatoes. We already had been too far ahead to scale back. And this community just stepped in and fundraised to support both feeding our community and us as farmers.
I'd like to kind of rewind a little bit and give props to Oregon Food Bank because the way that they distributed LFPA funds was through an RFP. And that's the email that I got was a grant that was available specifically for underserved farmers and with a focus on providing food to underserved communities. And so it was an invitation for me as a woman, an immigrant, a person of color to say, okay, like that I am being invited to be proud of what I can bring to the table. And it really felt like an intentional act of maybe not leveling the playing field, but at least like, a push in that direction. So, for me, it created a space to identify as an immigrant. My family moved here when I was a toddler, and only recently, out of fear, did I become a US citizen. Um, and working with LFPA, it's been a deeply personal journey for me. I can't tell you how many times I've been brought to tears in just deep gratitude for the validation and the confidence that it has given me as a small farmer to do what I know how to do, a lot of it intuitively, a lot of it um, through maybe what someone might call an ancestral connection. I feel guided by forces that are not necessarily something that you could research in a book or on a website. And it also created a pathway for us to connect with organizations who have been working with underserved communities. So we started a tiny little CSA for folks that need a lot of help. They just, whether it's financial or maybe have special needs. And so they would get one-on-one assistance from a social worker on how to prepare the food that they were being provided. They would get recipes. Um, and then we started working with an organization called Vitamoses that we would bring food in to their refrigerator once a week. And then also we opened up our online store to those customers. And so folks that would walk into the center would sit down at a computer and look at our online store and order exactly what they wanted. And then I would deliver that to their door once a week. And so it wasn't just a thing of like, um, I'm opening a refrigerator, I'm walking into a food pantry, and I'm at the mercy of whatever it is they have. It was I'm getting exactly what I want, and it's been freshly harvested, and it hasn't been sitting on a shelf or in a walk-in for weeks on end. And so for me, the connection of being able to bring a fresh bag of produce of which I had harvested and washed and like packed myself and leave it on a doorstep and seeing like how much care goes into the homes that people have. Um, it just it made a connection for me that just it deeply informs the amount of passion that I have and the determination I have to continue to find a way to distribute to these folks, even though the funds have dropped off. And then we had a really fun idea to have free food at the farmers market. And in order to not like um, compete with other farmers that weren't getting LFPA funds, we used our farm currency, which we'd already had in rotation at our farm for years. And anyone who needed it would just go ask for sunbacks, that's what they're called, and at the farmers market table, and then they were redeemable only at our stand. But that way, customers could choose to go spend their SNAP and double up food bucks with us or with other farmers, but the sunbacks were only good at our booth. And so we had to put a max on how much people could get every week, but then people would come back every week. And if they wanted to like save up to can tomatoes or something, they didn't have to spend them that week. And so we would have people that would stock up their sunbacks and then like make big bulk purchases. And then the other fun thing that we did was we used LFPA funds to create what we called Sunbow Direct. And so we issued gift cards to people to use on our online store. And so they got a stipend, really. And then they could just spend that throughout the year by shopping our online store. And again, it was just the ability to get exactly what they want and when they wanted it. So I don't know if I answered the question, but that's what I had to say.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Bee. Kristen, did you want to jump in on any of that?
Sure, yeah. So I mean LFPA for us, it sounds like it kind of rolls out really differently in different places, but for us, I know somebody put in the chat, there's a lot of CAF people, I think, on this call, that our food hub was created intentionally. Like we wanted to build an environment that was uplifting small farms and farmers of color and disadvantaged farmers. And so we were the I think the only food hub in San Diego that qualified in some senses to participate. And so that helped us, really prioritize small. Most of our farms are very small. I think our largest farm is like 150 acres. So um, it was, I mean, I know I'm probably just preaching to the choir, but it's a game-changing program. Like it was very well designed. We got paid very well to pack CSA style boxes that were 10 pounds, and you could buy in from other producers. So if you were stressed about not having all your items, you could add on from other local growers. So essentially, like running a CSA, as many of you might know, can be really stressful and time consuming, but also really great because you have the upfront income and you have so much flexibility in what you can put in your boxes week to week. So especially for what I saw with like more beginning smaller farms is that it's one of the best market channels to start with. Getting into restaurant and wholesale and even starting a farm stand, it takes a little bit more savvy with marketing and consistency, things like that. So LFPA created like a huge expansion for all of the farms that we work with at Foodshed. And for me personally, I don't think I would have started my farm without this program. Um, at the time, I was working full time as our aggregator and buying in for our own LFPA boxes. And it just happened that I owned another farm. We lost our lease. Our business had to split up, but I was able to get this opportunity really close to where I live. And then LFPA came on, and we've also been really fortunate that a private donor has picked it up and continued a very similar program at a slightly lower price point, but still, it's great to have it continue throughout the rest of this year. Um, and so I'm planning from there. But for me, as someone who has two jobs and kids I need to pick up from school every day, it was the best. It's been the best market channel for me because I can spend all my time on what I want to be doing, which is growing food. And it's given me a little bit more of a buffer time to, get my ducks in a row to start my other market channels. I do sell also like full time to our food hub, which also like 90% of our sales are going to low income disadvantaged community members. So that's the base, sort of the whole basis of my market right now. Um, I'm not as much focused on like high end, highly profitable market channels just because there's a lot of extra work that goes into that as well. And my farm is in a community that is like a food swamp, right? And so there's all kinds of access issues as well. And so it feels really good to be able to see some of that go like full cycle for now.
Thanks so much. Kristen, you might have already mentioned this, but can you tell us a little bit about who the LFPA administrator is in California and how that funding was disseminated?
I don't know as much about that. I know it was
I
through,
can speak to that.
yes, other people on this call I think have more experience. I just know like the one contact that we had, but I know it was like nonprofit and CDFA. So
Should I answer that,
Sure,
Shelby?
Delia. Yeah, go ahead.
Um, yeah, I'm Delia Hitz I'm a contractor with CAF as an account manager for Farms Together. And I see my colleague Yamilet. Hi. She might want to say something too. So Farms Together is almost over in California. The contract was between the California Department of Social Services and the California Association of Food Banks. And that ends at the end of July. So most of the contracts that California Association of Food Banks had with the different food hubs, there were about 40 of them in the state. Those contracts are ending, and some have already ended, some will be ending in the coming weeks. And the program was designed and managed by CAF, Community Alliance with Family Farmers, and Fresh Approach, which is a nonprofit in Oakland that works with different kinds of programs like mobile farmers markets and nutrition programs and various other things. And so it was those three organizations, CAFB, the food bank organization, CAF, and Fresh Approach, that managed the program.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear how it shook out in different states depending on who receives the funds and how they administered them. I think we're seeing some conversation in the chat about less than ideal situations where, maybe it didn't feel as equitable as it did for our three farmers that we're hearing from today. And so, yeah, just wanted to learn a little bit more about how that happened for you all in California. Thanks for providing that insight.
And Shelby, I think
Yeah.
just reading through the chat stuff, sometimes it's really hard for a small farm to scale up to have enough. Like a lot of people just started figuring out how to growing large scale when they knew that they could have a consistent income from the LFPA channel. And so I feel like that mattered too, like how quickly the farm could really jump on and be like, wow, if I know I can sell the carrots, I can grow more of them. But then you have to be able to grow more of them really well. And so I think that even if the income looks small, as far as like how much money went to the small farms, it actually probably made a really big difference, because the income of the small farms is smaller anyway. I do know that some states, it seems like, for example, Iowa made this Choose Iowa program, and this is not offense to anybody that's in Iowa on the webinar, but Iowa made this Choose Iowa program to mock the LFPA program, but the budget for the entire state was about $60,000. And like, I know that our farm had that in sales in 1 year. And so that can't really touch the whole state. And so there's that kind of setback. But then also knowing that they had, if all of the food hubs had such a small budget, they probably picked the cheapest farmer and not necessarily the one closest to the food bank. And I think that made a big difference too. Is the goal to help the farmer supply food to the closest food pantry to it, or is our goal going to be to buy the most food to serve the most people? And I think that that's where states took a different opinion on it. In Iowa, they developed a really clear spreadsheet about like what's the highest and what's the lowest price point that we're going to pay a farmer for every single crop: meat, eggs, every single thing, chicken feet, livers, every single thing, very detailed out. And then we could kind of give feedback and say, well, I can't produce chicken feet for that price. And then they would adjust it. But I do feel like some states just went for like, we can give eggs to our food pantries. Let's find the biggest, cheapest farm and buy their eggs and give them to everyone, versus helping out the small farm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really struck by how the trust that you all cultivated with these funding agencies and with the community partners really facilitated a lot of dignity for you as farmers and the price points that you were getting, and also for the food that the community partners were receiving. So thank you all so much for sharing on that. You've spoken very highly of LFPA so far, and I want to pivot a little bit and just hear about some of the challenges that you might have faced with the program. How did you pivot to overcome any challenges? And in retrospect, what would have helped to prevent them?
We probably all would say that the biggest challenge was having the program cut after there was already planning and purchases made. Our food hubs in Iowa did a great job, even back in October, of sitting down with all the producers and kind of planning out, hey, we want you to have 110 dozen eggs budget for the food pantries each week. And so then right away I ordered the hens so that they would show up and they would be ready to lay their eggs right when the program funding started. Well, then it was cut. And so we had already made all of those expenses. But then I guess in far as like the day-to-day operations of LFPA, sometimes for us, because we were generally delivering to our food pantries and there was some budget to do the delivery, I really wish that I wasn't the one doing that, because I didn't have time, and the pay wasn't enough to like pay a driver, because you're just taking 2 cases of eggs to each food pantry and it takes 3 hours to go around to all 5 food pantries. And so I wish that there was a better way actually get the food around. And Iowa has a really great system with a hub to hub network, but physically getting the food to the hub takes a lot of time and coordination. Less time than setting up at a farmer's market, but I still wish that the payment would have been better for the driving part so I could pay a driver to do that side of it.
No, we didn't experience any challenges with LFPA. I mean, when the funding got cut, basically the only thing I remember was that, oh, instead of through December, you have through, I think, end of September or maybe first week of October. But then our funds administrator, Oregon Food Bank, put a task force to work, and they managed to get that extended through the end of the year. So it ended up being no problem for us. I've nothing but good things to say about it.
I think so our food hub kind of designed some of the parts of the program in a way that was very like farmer forward. So like we had everybody packing in boxes, so our hub would buy the boxes, the farmers would deliver to us, and then we would palletize, give boxes and stickers for the following week. So really the farmer just has to like get their product to us, and then we were responsible for the added layers of which boxes were going to which food bank on which day. The only thing we ran into a little bit was one of the food banks we work with is very they don't like, I forget the term for the type of product, but basically anything that's like a salad mix, spinach, or spicy mix. They don't want anything that's they consider pre-cut, even though we tried to explain to them, like, when I harvest a head of lettuce, I'm kind of harvesting it the same way, washing it the same way. But anything that was they considered processed would get pulled. So we had a couple instances where, despite many reminders to some of our farms, we'd have our boxes like recalled and we have to go in and like repack, 400 boxes. But again, like our food hub took on that labor to help the farmers and to kind of smooth it out, the relationship and work on the education piece behind the scenes.
Thank you all so much for sharing a little bit more about that side of things. Ashley just touched on this in her last response, but we're curious how you handled delivery through this program, moving food from farms and cooperatives to community partners. And if you happen to have a story of a delivery that went well, we would love to hear about that too.
So our farm, ever since we opened our doors in 2015, we've been doing deliveries to the individual consumer. So our model is based on direct to consumer. And LFPA is really what opened the doors to more of a wholesale kind of a situation for us. Although, as you heard earlier, we also had a lot of direct consumer aspects to our LFPA program. But so we were already set up for deliveries to individuals' homes, and I would do once a week deliveries to a gleaners program, once a week deliveries to Vina Moses, and then there were other components where they would just come pick up on the farm. And I would say for me, like I had mentioned before, carrying that bag of groceries and setting it on a doorstep and ringing the doorbell or knocking on the door and walking away and just knowing that that person was getting exactly what they wanted was just fully satisfying every week. So yeah, again, just the way that it was administered made it so easy as a small farmer. The way that our farm was set up, worked really well with the way that the grants were set up. And I mean, I even thought that the spreadsheets for tracking our spending was easy to work with. So yeah, for us it just felt very natural, and it just felt like an extension of how our farm was already operating.
Yeah, we also just had like our farmers deliver to our hub, and we have two locations. So most of our farms are within anywhere from 15 to 20, half hour away from one of the two locations. And then the hub staff was taking on the logistics because they had, larger vehicle capacity and things like that. So the main restriction for most farms is how many boxes they could transport to us is sort of how they ended up deciding how many they could pack.
Um, I forget compared to like Oregon and California, everything is more far away in Iowa. And so, I mean, our closest food pantry is 20-minute drive, and the food hub is an hour. And I'm one of all of us are about that far away. And so that is kind of where my talking points earlier were coming from. The other challenge that I know the food pantries and the food hubs, and there were some other grants happening along this time to help the food hubs expand their like fridge and freezer capacity, because I know that was a barrier, and it turned into a barrier for my farm because, if the food pantry only has one fridge, I really can't deliver that many dozen eggs at a time because they don't have room to store them. And the same thing with some of those vegetables. Like if the food pantry doesn't have space to put all of these vegetables in the fridge, well, then I need to be driving there twice a week, or some of the food pantries are only open once a week. And so those kinds of things did impact my farm, but I know they impacted the food hubs and the food pantries more, is just not having enough space to have that much fresh food that we can deliver to them at once.
Yeah, Ashley, you mentioned kind of scaling up some of your infrastructure in terms of an egg washer, for example. Did you notice that any of the hubs or pantries that you worked with were able to bring in new infrastructure to support the increase of food as well?
Um, I don't know what grants necessarily they received, but I know that both one that's so our farm is like basically right between Interstate 80, and so we could be going to either food hub, two of the five food hubs very quickly. And by very quickly, I mean like an hour because that's how far everything is away from here. and and so I know that both of those food hubs that were close to me had a ton of other grants that they had received to buy cars, coolers, refrigerators, that kind of stuff. Like I think one is called RFSI. And then there were some local Iowa grants too. And so, yeah, they were purchasing this stuff to scale up at the same time. And now, hopefully, this local food movement keeps moving so that they're using all of those things that those grant monies had them buy. Because that's kind of another thought of mine is, hopefully we can keep food moving through those hubs for other sales channels that aren't LFPA. But yes.
Yeah, thanks. It's interesting to hear how LFP and RFSI were able to complement each other in some ways to provide that needed infrastructure. And really great to have different perspectives based on where you're at in the US and what your geography looks like as well. So in this era of post LFPA, I know a few folks are still kind of working on the last bit of funding from that. We're curious to know what funding sources continue to fund farm to food assistance work in your worlds. Who have you found is still interested in funding this kind of work and invested in paying local farmers the prices that they deserve to be able to deliver that food to community access points?
I know I shared a little bit about just the community in general picking up the loss of LFPA funds, and the town in particular is Grinnell here, Grinnell, Iowa. There were some big, larger donations from people. I don't necessarily know their names, but then there were a lot of smaller donations. And Grinnell Farm to Table, which is the name of that hub, does a great job. For example, when you use their online order form to place your own order for pickup, you can donate $5 to our food access fund. When you buy your CSA box, buy half of someone else's box. And so they have a lot of those opportunities built in for people in the community that can afford it to go ahead and afford it. And then Iowa has made, on a much smaller scale than LFPA, its own similar grant program where they can pay farmers for food. And we've also seen some luck, like our local food pantry in Montezuma just does like I'll just call it like an egg drive. Like we want to continue supplying eggs through the food pantry from Pleasant Grove Homestead. Would you donate this much, $4.75 for us to continue buying eggs from Ashley? And then we run a credit on our account to be able to continue getting them eggs as they need them. And so it's kind of just really relying on the local community a lot more than the federal government the past year.
For us in Oregon, Oregon Food Bank continues to, I think, find funding, and I'm not sure where it comes from, but there's a smaller fund called Community Producer Support grants that they put a call out for earlier this year, and so it's a lot smaller, but definitely makes helps towards our bottom line. And then mutual aid support from our community members, having shared, through our newsletter what's been going on with the grants, and giving our customers the ability to help advocate for positive changes in Oregon legislature that would support this kind of funding, has created an avenue for people to say, we want to support what you're doing, even though the funding has gone away. And so we'll get private, what we're calling pre-purchases from people. And so folks will send in a check for a couple $100s, and then that goes into a fund where people can apply for stipends for food from us. And then we have a local organization called Lynn Benton Food Share, and we were able to establish a relationship with them through LFPA. They initially were the ones doing the small CSA, and after seeing a successful year with us, they then started contracting privately. And I think most of their funding comes from private donations as well. They work really hard in our community to get funded through private donations. And then another one of our connections through LFPA is along with community services, and they're a food bank and a gleaners program. And they applied for funding from a private donation to continue working with us. And so we've been, and then, sorry, I almost forgot, Vina Moses also applied for a grant from, I can't remember, I think another private foundation to continue their work with us. And again, these are all like reduced amounts compared to LFPA, but we're probably about at 65% of what we were doing through LFPA. So it's been a huge boost in confidence, and a huge relationship builder. So LFPA really built a path for us to have these connections, and for these organizations to have confidence in us that they can trust us to grow food that they can then distribute. So it's been pretty cool.
Our extension was also through a private funder, but I do know that our food hub is a part of a lot of the statewide efforts that Delia mentioned that are happening, the advocacy as well.
Thank you all. Kind of tagging along on that, I'm curious how participating in LFPA prepared you for different opportunities that you're involved in now, whether that be new relationships, infrastructure, the creation of new markets, or something else.
Our farm really just got that confidence boost that we really can grow at that scale, and especially hearing that the funding was cut kind of abruptly and doing that hustle to still find a home for the product and learning like we really can find a home for that product. At first, we had this debate between my husband and I because, again, it's my husband and I doing this full time, and we have other employees too. Like, we were going to be sending all of these tomatoes to the food bank. Should we just cut the plants out and not grow them all, or should we try and grow them all and find a home for them? And even this year, we didn't really scale back, even though the funding is down, um, because we have that confidence boost that we can find a home for it, and we got comfortable growing at that scale. And the promise of money from LFPA helped us kind of boost that confidence. Like, we're comfortable growing twice as many tomatoes as we would for a farmer's market because we know that the food bank and the food hub would buy them. And so let's try it. And we just used the years that had the blessings of the LFPA funding to get good at growing on that large scale. And like I mentioned before, using the money to buy things to help us do it faster.
I think in addition to just all the examples I've already given to this, um, you know, our farm, it was just my husband and I up until 2020. And then when COVID hit, um, because we were already set up with an online store and home delivery, it kind of blew our business up. Like, I think we like tripled our sales that year. And I mean, it wasn't a huge number. I think we hit like 55,000 because we were real small potatoes before that. But what LFPA did was it allowed us to basically double our sales by when we really needed it most, because by 2023, in our state, COVID restrictions were completely lifted, and people were not interested in cooking, and people were not interested in, I mean, they just our business. We had a really hard conversation in August of 2022, I think it was. We thought we were going to have to close our doors because, I mean, the bottom really dropped out on us after those COVID restrictions were lifted. And then LFPA came along and um, basically saved us from having to have that conversation the following year. And also there were some additional grants, some mini grants that helped build up our infrastructure to really we had the basics set up, but once we knew that we were going to continue growing larger amounts for different accounts, then we had to just improve our wash pack station and get more tables for an additional farmers market. And there were all of these smaller costs that were then supported by an additional grant. And so for us, LFPA really they saved us like from having to either shut down or get part-time jobs again or any of that, and also gave us the ability to hire help. And so we have decided to boldly keep going in that direction this year, and we have the equivalent of 3 full-time employees now, and we're not looking back. We're just going to keep going.
Yeah, kind of echoing what was already said, but for me, it really allowed me to focus on building out my farm, which I only started in last April. at this new site, and it's pretty expensive when you're starting from, ground zero to put in infrastructure and just develop the whole site. So I was able to really focus more time on that and less on marketing because I had that as a locked-in sales channel. And then this year I've been able to bring someone on part-time as well and pay myself, which is always nice. So that's been great. Yeah.
I honestly wasn't expecting those answers, and they're really beautiful. Thank you for sharing about how it's given you confidence and allowed you to scale up and pay yourself. Um, really soaking in the wisdom that you all are sharing. We have one more question for you all before we hand it over to the other folks in the room to ask their questions. And that is, what do program administrators of farm to food assistance programs need to know about your work to help you continue participating in this work? We have food banks, nonprofit organizations, cities and counties in this room, and our ears are open. So let us know what you're thinking about that one.
One of the things that Grinnell Food Hub did really well, in comparison to the other food hubs, and that's mostly because it's actually ran by a previous farmer and he knew this, but and this falls into place whether you're talking about funding or running the organization. As a farmer, we need a lot more time to plan. Like if you, for example, an egg laying hen, from the time it's a baby chick until it lays us an egg is 4 months. Okay. And so I have to know that you want 100 dozen eggs from my farm 4 months before you're going to have them ready for you. One of the things that I really believed when I was doing LFPA is that I didn't want to only supply to LFPA and, let's say, not go to my local normal farmers market, because we knew that LFPA was not permanent. And if I funneled all my stuff through the food pantries and then LFPA was gone, I wouldn't have those other sales channels built up. And so you have to meet with the farmers way in advance to be able to have this plan in place for what you're needing to purchase from them. And I think that's what's happening a lot with these other programs where, you've all seen in the news where this program was in place and then Trump cut it, and then this program was in place and then Trump cut it. Like that doesn't work, because as soon as I hear you lost LFPA funding, I might sell 300 hens because I don't have a home for the eggs. And it just takes that kind of continual planning. And so Grinnell Farm to Table, if the LFPA purchases started in April, they would be planning all the way back in October, even as far as making a spreadsheet of, we're going to rely on Pleasant Grove Homestead for spinach, cabbage, carrots, green onions, and we're going to rely on this farm for these tomatoes, peppers, onions, potatoes. And we would know like who was covering what, and then we would have a backup producer, in case something wild happened or a farmer quit. But like it takes a long time to grow a lot of these crops, guys. So you have to plan ahead with us, because I'm not going to plant 1,000 cabbages unless I have like it in my head that I can move them somewhere.
I just want to tag on to that, that application windows, please make them in the winter. There's nothing worse than having an RFP come out in March when you're like really gearing up. It's crushing to go, I really could use that funding, but I can't make the time to apply for that. So, putting out your RFPs in like, I don't know, November with deadline like by February, end of February at the latest, is a simple, if possible, logistical thing that would really be helpful. I also just want to say thank you for everything that you do, because I think being a farmer, I get to see the faces of the people that we're serving, and I get to see like the result of the funding that has gone out. And I know that in a way I am also like a customer for Oregon Food Bank. And so they get to interact with me, but I represent hundreds, probably thousands of people in my community. And so just know that what you're doing is of huge value. It really helps me as a small farmer to know that the organizations we're working with, um, if they have a clear vision about what kind of programming that they want to support, if you can look at what you're doing as an incubator for setting up a, a healthier regional food system, uh, anything like that that can bring clarity to how you're going about your work that can be communicated to the folks that you're working with is super helpful. Like if you look at Oregon Food Bank's social media, I mean, it is just chock full of the way that they're marketing it. It is clear to me as a farmer that I am supported and that the work that I am doing supports their mission. So it's just super helpful to have all of that be reflected in the marketing.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I have to add is just echoing what has already been said. And this is something that we run into with like all of our institutional market channels is just like we're working on systems change. We're doing the total opposite of what the current distribution system is, which is like, I want something tomorrow. Can you deliver it? It's already been harvested. It's already sitting somewhere in stock. And like food banks, especially, they're getting, overproduction from massively large farms, especially here in California. And so they're not used to at all, like even understanding when we're telling them, like, I need 3 months, I need 6 months. I cannot deliver that many strawberries to you tomorrow. Like, there's no feasible way. But our farmers can do it, but we can't do it tomorrow. Um, and so it's like you're asking them to go out on a limb and plan with you and change the way some of their systems work. For us, some of it was like payment issues too. Like some of the big companies they work with their cash flow is so much larger, so they can wait a whole lot longer for getting payments. And we had to like push back hard on that and say that no, we pay our farmers every week. Like we can't operate like that. It's just not going to work. So it's hard knowing that you're asking everyone to do something that's the total opposite of all these other convenient ways that their system is operating. But a program like this kind of gives hope. Like if we can influence and shape how these programs are designed and run, and then we can carve out some space um, to keep going and to keep investing in, regional food systems, which hopefully after the pandemic, people see value in that in a way that I think would have taken a whole lot longer than maybe now. People understand why that resiliency is needed and why we should keep investing and keep building it out. So that when we're needed, we're there for you because it's not something you can, like you said, you can't make a chicken lay an egg when it's 1 month old. It's not going to work. So
Thank you all so much for those insights. I was taking notes. I'm sure that others in the room were as well. It seems like we got to all of the questions that were in the chat, but I want to leave a minute in case we did not. Does anybody have a burning question that did not get answered as we had our conversation together?
I have one. Uh, so like I said in the chat at the beginning, I'm with NSAC, and yeah, I guess I'm curious if y'all are you advocacy was mentioned, but and I'm curious about how that's like playing in here. Are you interested in advocacy around like LFPA or the bills? that are in now, or is your focus more on what's happening locally and like wanting it to stay there?
I personally get too much field work to do to spend much time advocating for one. And this LFPA funding being cut is not the only time that the federal government has betrayed me, for lack of a better word. And so I have felt so much support from my local communities that I'm just kind of going to roll with having that local support. And if some of it ends up being funded by the federal government, then that's fine. But maybe my heart's just been broken a little bit to put trust into it at this point. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of where I fall on it.
I'm all for it. I think if any of you have an opportunity to speak on the behalf of farmers and regional food systems work, it may feel like it's falling on deaf ears with our current administration. However, I think there are legislators who are paying attention, and I think it might feel like you're rolling that boulder up a hill and it keeps rolling back on you. But it, ultimately, I don't think that it's a waste of time because we see you, we're paying attention. And yes, right now we're turning more locally, like within our communities, for the support that has is clearly there, um, even if it's like in smaller amounts. But that doesn't mean that the work on the national level isn't significant. So keep going, and thank you.
I just want to plug the storytelling guide again. I think that this is a beautiful way that we as non-farmers can show up for the farmers who work so tirelessly to grow food for us. And so if you are able to engage in advocacy work in that way, by setting up time to talk with your farmers who have participated in LFPA or other farm to food assistance programs to be able to tell their story and the impact that it's had on them. That is a way that we can play that role for them when they can't step away from the field or delivery or many of the other things that they are doing on a daily basis. And I know one of the things that Groundwork Collective told us last time was the importance of paying farmers for that time as well, so that they aren't having to lose income from being able to tell their story. So many great resources in that storytelling guide. There's also that peer group that is forming next week if you all are interested in joining in that way. But just couldn't let time pass without doing one more plug for that. And we have 2 minutes. I would love to hear from folks before they go what insight you gained today that you want to carry forward in your F2FA work. So if you want to pop your little gleaning that you're taking away from today in the chat, we would love to hear about that. And then just please give a warm thank you to Ashley, B, and Kristen for taking time to be with us here today. Throw up an emoji or a little bit of love in the chat for them. We are so grateful for you all for spending your time sharing your insights, and really having a profound conversation that we will take with us into our work. Thank you all so much for being here.